It's unmuted.
Looks like everybody's here now.
Yeah, we'll just, I hear a couple more clicks as people are joining in and bringing their agendas up. So we'll start here in just another minute. All right, counselors, are we, and city staff, are we ready to begin? Everybody got their documents up and running?
Ready.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right, thank you all very much for joining us here for our regular meeting, Tuesday, August 11th of the City Council. I now call the meeting to order. And at this point, we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, indivisible,
visible
with liberty and justice
for
for
all.
all.
All right, thank you very much again for coming, for joining us electronically for our regular meeting for August. We have a nice full agenda this evening and looking forward to, I would expect a few more folks to join us as we go. But we will begin with city business and approval of the agenda. So at this point, we have our agenda set, consent and discussion action agenda. Any comments or requests to change from the council? Seeing none, any public comment on the agenda? Hearing none, can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
First from Grover, second from West. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Excellent. So the agenda is approved as written. The next thing is we have our minutes from July 14th meeting to discuss any substantive changes for the minutes from our July meeting. Any counselor comments regarding the minutes from July? Hearing or seeing none, any comments from the public regarding the minutes as, excuse me, as presented in the packet?
Anita Thompson does.
Okay, Anita, go ahead.
Yeah, it might be a question and an addition, but I'm not sure, so I'm just going to bring it up. It's regarding the item number 5, discussion decision regarding water main placement for Van Wyck. It's regarding this second sentence on page 4. It's when it states that the water main on Edwards is 4 inches and out of service water main on Van Wyck is 6 inches. Shouldn't it be vice versa, meaning that it's 6 inches for the water main on Edwards, 4 inches on the water main on Van Wyck?
Gabe, Eli, I know we don't have Public Works with us, but can you weigh in on that? I'm not able to answer that.
I'm going to defer to Eli. I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, it's 6 inches on Edwards,
Yeah, doesn't read that.
Yeah, and the 4 inches is the one on Van Wyck that's going to be routed onto Edwards, and it'll also be 6 inches, the new add-on.
So that needs to be corrected in the minutes, because that's
Eli?
not what it reads. And then it would also have to be corrected on 5, states that it's,
Eli, this is Patrick Sullivan from GHD. May I make a comment?
Yes, Patrick, go ahead.
So I think that is incorrect. From what I understand from the as-built plan set, that there's a 6-inch line that comes down Edwards and then branches down Van Wyck. That is the line that has been taken out of service down Van Wyck. There is a parallel 4-inch line that goes down Edwards and down Galindo. That's the currently active line. So I do not believe it is a 6-inch line that goes down Edwards and Galindo.
Okay, I think because we just want to make sure that we are correct on this, if we can bring this back to the consent agenda for next meeting, just to make sure that we have our information correct. Does the council approve of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Anita, for bringing that to our attention, and we will review with Public Works exactly what we have running down Edwards and Galindo. Does that work?
and the only reason why I brought it up is because I thought that was one of the issues of why the water flow was so low. There was a low flow was because it was a 4-inch water main on Van Wyck and not a 6-inch. That's why I brought it up.
No, it's worthy. We want to make sure we're representing what's really going on there. So thanks for bringing that to our attention. Any other comments from council or public regarding the minutes from the July meeting? All right, hearing and seeing no comments, do we have a motion to approve the minutes with the intent of coming back to, actually, we're not going to approve it. Sorry. We're going to table this and bring it to the consent agenda for our following meeting in, what month are we? In September. So we will table this minutes until then.
Steve, this is Patrick Sullivan from GHD. I'm looking at the as-built plan sets right now. It is the as-built plan sets that Public Works has show that it's a 6-inch line that is broken going down Van Wyck, and that it shows a 4-inch parallel line down Edwards. So what I said earlier is correct, and I think the way it was presented originally was correct. So,
Oh, okay.
and I'm looking right now at the as-built plan. So.
Well, then that's what we would do is look at those plans. And so seeing that we have a confirmation that the information in the minutes are correct, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion that we approve the minutes.
I'll second.
First by Grover, second by West. All those in favor?
Aye.
And I know that Tom Davies is having connectivity issues. Tom, are you able to hear this? And if so, can you call in with your phone to the meeting? I want to take just a brief, what would this be? This would be a media timeout if we still had professional sports to make sure that we have Tom connected. Let me text him back.
Can you guys tell me where we are on the agenda? I've been off for the last 10 minutes. This is Tom Davies.
So it sounds like you have your connection back up, Tom. So we just discussed the minutes from the July meeting.
Okay.
And there was a comment from Anita about the details of the lines, the 6-inch and 4-inch line, and Patrick Sullivan just looked at the specs, and those figures are correct. So we just approved the minutes.
Okay,
Do you have any substantive changes that you wanted to make to the minutes?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, so we are back on point. And Tom, please text me if you lose connection again, and we'll try to figure an alternate plan.
Will do.
All right, so moving on to council reports and committee assignments. Let's start with Mr. West. Do you have any council reports for us?
Nothing this month.
Excellent. Mr. Grover?
Yeah, I have a couple things. I'd like to announce my candidacy for November 3rd election. I'd like to keep this seat. I feel like I've had enough experience here that I can really get some things going and really address some of the city issues here, the feasibility of our own energy independence. So that's one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle I'm trying to put together. So that's about it for right now, and the rest of my comments will be during the agenda discussions.
Excellent. Mr. Davies, do you have any reports for us?
I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Klompus? You are on mute, sir.
How about now?
You're perfect.
Okay, fine. I completed all my onboarding activities, my Form 700, my ethics courses. I've reached out to all the different council members. I've met with the Rancheria shortly. I'm trying to meet with the Troy Ancestral Society. I've done a number of things to make sure that people know who I am so that I can be more active on the council. So following a discussion, Mr. Mayor, I have to have with you about committee assignments because I want to make sure I get that down and I can begin to support the council.
That's a great question or a great comment. So Eli and Gabe, if you can put a note to discuss council assignments at the next council meeting in September, and we can make sure that we're all covered.
Thank you.
And I don't have anything to report. I was unable to attend the Humboldt Transit Authority this month, and Redwood Region did not meet. Economic Development did not meet, so nothing to report there. So thank you very much, Council. At this point, we'll move on to staff reports, starting with Mr. Naffa.
Okay. First of all, I was going to check and just see if Lieutenant Kevin Miller is on the phone. So if you are, speak out, and then we'll let you do a report. Otherwise, I can get started. So there's a slurry seal project which will impact Parker, Edwards, Hector, Galindo, and Van Wyck. And that's scheduled to start on Monday, the 17th of August. And then we also have a town hall solar project. The proposals for the solar project are due September 3rd. And this
Water production and water use reports back in the staff report. If we could see that every month, just to make sure that we're not missing large losses of water, sudden losses of water, that would be great.
Okay, that'll be fine.
All right. Any other staff reports? Gabe, do you have anything for us this evening?
No, I don't, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. At this point, then, I'm going to move to the items from the floor, and I just want to read this to make sure I cover it. At this time, members of the public may comment on items not appearing on the agenda. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes or less. Comments should be directed to the council as a whole and not to individual council members or staff. Council and staff responses will be minimal for non-agenda items. At this point, I'd like to open it up to items from the floor, and we'll go through folks who are logged into WebEx first, and then I see a couple of phone numbers. We'll reach out to you after that, so make sure that I get that. I'm also going to put my phone number in the chat. If someone is having a hard time getting our attention, you can certainly text me, and we'll try to make sure that every voice is heard. But at this point, I offer items from the floor.
Anita Thompson.
Go ahead, Anita.
Sure. Thank you. On June 23rd, the city council approved 2 fire hydrant replacements and awarded the bid to Wallen Construction. And then at the June 23rd meeting, it was my understanding that the fire hydrants would be replaced within a couple of weeks. However, it did not happen. And then at the following city council meeting on July 14th, a question was asked, when would these fire hydrants be replaced? The council stated that the fire hydrants would be replaced within 2 weeks of this meeting, which would have been July 28th. It's August 11th and the fire hydrants still haven't been replaced. When are these 2 fire hydrants going to be replaced? Thank you.
They will be replaced starting the day after Labor Day. The contractor, Walland, has the technician that normally does the fire hydrants is in Ukiah on a project. And we chose to have that particular person do it because we know that they're experienced in doing it. So they will be here the day after Labor Day.
Thank you.
I do want to note, Mayor, so for our first agenda item, the Van Wyck Bicycle Pedestrian and Connectivity Project update and discussion, I just want to make it clear to the public that we will not be addressing the Van Wyck Trail as part of that because that's not part of the project. So if anyone has any comments regarding the Van Wyck Trail, they can feel free to do them now.
Very good. Mr. Miller, you're on mute, sir.
Unmuted. Okay. I see the agenda has been set up in such a way that comments on the trail itself are not part of the proposed connectivity project, but I have a couple of things to say. The staff report notes that the staff engaged with 21 stakeholders at 2 meetings. That's number one. Number 2, that vista points are planned on Van Wyck at either point end of the slump trail, and that stabilizing utilities, including the gravity storm drain pipe, are planned across the failed section. So here are my concerns, and I'm just going to read them within the 3 minutes allowed here. A stakeholder includes someone who has some consistent interest in the trail. How many trail user residents were at the stakeholder meetings? That's a question that I pose. It, of course, need not be answered because this is items from the floor. For the abandonment of a major trail, who represented the trail users at the stakeholder meetings? And I'm asking that we have another stakeholder meeting with outreach to trail using stakeholders. Second item. The use of Edward Street in front of view blocking houses and with nearby traffic is completely different experience from the present trail. We need another meeting to fully debate Edwards Walkway experience versus a Van Wyck Walkway or bridge being designed as part of this project. And number 5, a well-known problem with Trinidad decision-making is non-participation by residents. And we've already discussed how important it is to reach out. We're planning on doing that as a city much more, and it should have been done much more before the January 14th decision when very few people were watching. Very few people attended. And the major emotional comments were made by non-residents, and the weight of decision-making at that January 14th affected a huge, huge number of people who weren't really aware that that decision was being made. I'm asking that we have broader discussion with a well-attended and informed meeting. It's going to make it much more difficult for the councilors, and I really understand the position you're in because I've been there many times. But this was not a well-informed decision in January. It was a very narrow decision based on an emotional experience. And I recognize that there's been attempts with stakeholders to deal with it in a very difficult time for you, Mayor, and the other members of the stakeholder group.
Yes, sir.
Will that Trails decision meeting be discussing the Van Wyck Trail, or will the Van Wyck Trail be moot by tonight's decision?
No, that is for discussion next week.
Yeah, and let me add also, So next week, during the Trails Committee meeting, and then also regarding the Planning Commission meeting, they're talking about the temporary closure of the Van Wyck Trail, which we currently have it closed. It's part of the Coastal Commission process. And although this project does not have the trail included in it with the Caltrans funds, at a later date, we do want to address the trail and address what the community is looking for and find out if there is a viable solution that would work with both the Churai, the neighboring property owners, and the city residents as a whole.
All right, other items from the floor at this point. And David, I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
this is Dick Bruce, 780 Underwood Drive in Trinidad. Another item from the floor concerning the Van Wyck Trail. I want to second Dwight Miller's comments that the stakeholders meetings that have been held have not really involved all the stakeholders, that trail users, city residents other than the adjacent property owners have not been allowed into those meetings. And I think it's important that the city residents and trail users be recognized as stakeholders in this issue. Last week, when Mr. Grover was out collecting signatures for running for council, he mentioned that there was going to be a meeting that afternoon of concerned stakeholders concerning the Van Wyck Trail connectivity project. I looked on the city's website. There was absolutely nothing there. I called the city clerk, and he indicated that it was basically it's for neighboring residents. I had no ability at that time to make any comments regarding it. I consider myself to be a stakeholder. My wife and I have used that trail for 40 years. And so I think it's really important that other people that are residents of town and trail users be considered as stakeholders when these meetings are held. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dick. David, did you want to comment quickly?
Yes, I just kind of wanted to add the same thing that they've been saying too. As the person who lives right here, the person who owns the property was not able to access that meeting too, and she's it was very important to her. And I also wanted to put out there, as for the designs and that, I'm always here and I'm willing to walk out there and talk to people. I have some pretty intense cliffside construction experience myself, so I'm trying to work with people too, but the access has to be a little more available to I guess is the general consensus. So that's all.
Very good. And just as a reminder, folks, that we're not making any decisions tonight, that we are reaching out to different groups. And so, we are constrained by COVID not being able to join together in one large meeting. So we're taking this in smaller chunks. And in no way are we trying to keep anybody out. So thank you very much for your comments regarding stakeholders and the inclusion of all stakeholders. So at this point, other items from the floor that people wish to share. All right, there are a couple of people that are on the phone. I don't know how to do this because you can unmute yourselves when you're calling in.
I can unmute one of them one at a time if you'd like. This is City Clerk.
Yeah, that'd be fine. I know one of them is Tom, who's called in with the phone and also dialed in with the WebEx. And so one of the 845 numbers is Tom, but how about the 677 number? I see 3 numbers so far.
I'll unmute the 677.
Any comments from our items from the floor from our 677 caller? Okay, hearing none. Let's just go for the next 845 number. It might be Tom.
Okay, here we go. Unmute.
I'm an 845 number.
That's you, Tom. Okay.
You know how to like how do I unmute?
I'll just leave you on unmuted.
Thank you.
There we go. And then the other 845 number.
Here we go. Okay, we're unmuted.
Hi, this is Sarah Lindgren Akana from the Cherry Ancestral Society.
Hello, Sarah.
I didn't have any comments though.
Okay, but now we know who the second 845 number is. So thanks for letting us know. Gabe, hopefully you can keep track of those because they're right next to each other on my screen. So
I think we've got just, I think for clarity, I think we have two mute options. The caller can mute themselves and then I can mute from as a host. So why don't I leave those callers on unmuted and they can mute themselves and then they can chime in at any time.
very good. Okay, so we are moving on then. So thank you for the items from the floor. At this point, we'll move on to the consent agenda. All matters on the consent agenda are considered routine by the City Council and are enacted in one motion. There's no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussion is requested by any council member, that item is removed from the calendar, but we've already discussed the agenda for tonight. A single opportunity for public comment on the consent agenda is available to the public. At this point, I'd like to open it up to the public turning their video off until they wish to speak, and that sometimes can free up some of the data that's flowing through our lines here. So hopefully that will help everyone have a better connection. All right, moving on. We will start with our first discussion action agenda item. Number one is discussion decision regarding the Van Wyck Trail Connectivity Project, revised design concept. And so just to be clear that we are talking about the entire project and that we invite and encourage participation at the Trails meeting or the Planning Commission as the agenda items roll out to discuss the section of the trail that we call the Van Wyck Trail, but this project is called the Van Wyck Connectivity Project. So please understand the distinction and that we are going to continue to try to seek feedback from as many people as possible. And with that, though, I do want to turn this over to Trevor. Oh, go ahead, Richard.
I'm sorry. I wanted to make a comment on the police. Hopefully in the future, we'll be able to get a report back from the HCSO office about where the trends are for Trinidad. That was my only comment. Thank you.
Okay. We can certainly follow up with we can add some detail to our staff report that we get on a monthly basis and see if we can reach out for that. So thanks for that comment. Moving back then to our discussion decision item regarding the Van Wyck Trail. If we could, I'd like to turn this over to Trevor.
And if I could intercede.
Can we pull it up and rotate? There we go. Excellent. On my screen, it looks like I'm seeing only part of the slide.
There we go. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so couple of images on this first slide that I wanted to point out. On the bottom left is just the section of the trail that where the slide is happening. This is the issue with the utilities has to do with the failing land structure that's threatening those utilities. So things I wanted to talk about, we can go to the next slide, is the reason for doing the utility stabilization. I wanted to touch briefly on previous efforts and kind of show an option for how to stabilize the utilities. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so little background is this is an ongoing problem that's been happening with this section of the trail sliding out, and when it slides, it pulls the utilities with it. So the utilities that are there is a storm drain pipeline, which is a concrete pipeline. It flows via gravity flow, so the angle of the pipe is important. If you have a low spot in the pipe, it won't flow. If the pipe fractures, it will cause a leaking at a spot in the middle of a slide where you don't want it. There is also a water line which is currently isolated due to it being broken from the slide. And there is a phone utility, and in this picture, you can see the green utility box, the kind of over at an angle, that's kind of showing you where the slide's happening. Okay, next slide, please. So in 2010, there was a geotechnical investigation done, and that was in support of a study done by RGH to figure out what to do to mitigate the slide. Efforts were made at that time to keep that section from sliding. Since then, the slide has continued. Since 2011, that the water line, which is a 6-inch asbestos concrete pipe, has been isolated, meaning a valve on either end has been added. It's been shut off on either end, and that line is no longer in use. It was recently tested where we opened up one of the valves to see if the line was still intact, and it was found to not be intact. So the findings and where we're at today is that the water line in that section, the drinking water line, is no longer in service and not serviceable. The telecom, the telephone line is in threat. Any more movement that could break, and the storm drain line is of an unknown quality. We don't know if it's how well it's functioning, if it's functioning, or if it's broken. But it needs to be for the upper system to drain. That is an important piece to the drainage. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So already hit some of these bullets. All of these utilities right now are buried underground, and burying them underground keeps them at risk. The gravity flow nature of the storm drain line kind of requires that line to maintain that angle. So as ground, like I said previously, if that ground moves, it still is a problem. So we have to address the angle of that. The crossing over the active slide is where we were directed to. We looked at a number of options, and the option that I'm going to present tonight is an aerial support. This had a couple of reasons why this aerial support was chosen. One was its minimal impact on the ground disturbance. So if we could go to the next slide, I kind of have an aerial view to show what we're talking about. Okay, so here is an aerial view of Van Wyck. Moving from the upper right to the lower left, the water line, that's the 6-inch water line that comes down. There is a water valve that's right at the top end of this. There is a section called out where the active slide area is. There's a call out there for the green telecom pedestal, which we showed in that previous picture. So I'm getting some pretty strong feedback if people mute their microphones, if they're. So the call out for the telecom kind of gives you a reference in that picture, but there's a section of the trail that is sliding. So at the lower left corner of the water line, it shows where there is another valve. That section in between those two valves is little over 150 feet, and that is the isolated line. That line is no longer in service for the water line. So what we propose to do is put an anchor on either end of the slide area and use that anchor to suspend an I-beam. The I-beam, we can then attach the water line, the sewer line, and the telecom line to it. So any further movement underneath it, the I-beam would protect yeah, thanks for advancing that. So this image shows the concrete block that would be set into the ground. At the edge of the slide area, the SD is the storm drain line, the W is the water line, and the T is the telecom line, which is right along the top. We would put an angle iron over the top of it to protect that telecom line and also to deter people trying to use this as a walkway. So the advantage is for this this approach is cost, in that the design and installation is relatively straightforward. It allows us to maintain the angle for gravity flow in the storm drain pipeline. If there is further ground movement, it allows us to unbolt and move the anchor to maintain the existing lines. It keeps the lines above ground where they can be inspected and repaired if they are damaged due to movement. It also minimizes the ground disturbance in a sensitive area. So with that, is the end of my presentation, and I'd like to answer any questions.
Patrick, thanks for that, and for that diagram. I just have a quick question, and then I'll open it up. The installation of an I-beam, 150 foot roughly, is there a significant concern or issue with the equipment needed to install such a device? Is that all? Will this area accommodate the equipment needed to install such a device?
So I think I think that is a valid concern. The equipment necessary to move an I-beam of this size, it doesn't necessarily have to be that size. I think the smallest span we could get away with is about a 50-foot span. So let's, if we put a couple of options out there, as we go through the design process, I'm thinking it's going to be between 50 and that 150 feet. You could bring that in with a tracked cat, maybe two of them working together to bring it in. It could also be lowered in with a crane. Their access is an issue, and during the design process, we would come up with a strategy for getting that in. There are two buildings on that in that area that have recently had their foundations replaced. The type of beam and equipment used to lift those buildings up while they built the foundations is the same type of equipment that would be used to put this beam in to span this. So I know that the roads and the area there can support that type of equipment.
Okay, thank you very much. Counselors, do we have any questions for Patrick at this point?
I do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Patrick, is it possible when you put this I-beam in that it also could support some type of footbridge on top of it? That'd be a whole different type of I-beam.
I think the option that I've shown here is just for the utility crossing. This type of approach, if you wanted to expand it for a walking bridge, which is a different part of the project, could accommodate a utility crossing. So we've done that with other bike trail type of work. This area, the geotechnical situation there, it's unstable. So getting a bridge, like people think like, oh, how about a rail bridge or something like that? That's a pretty heavy structure. So not putting weight on an unstable surface is the main concern, which is why we were recommending just the utility crossing, and not, but the decision about the bridge would be a different part of the project. And I think Eli, you touched on that, and I think Steve, you touched on that as well. So I'm not I'm not ready to talk about the bridge piece. That I wasn't part of that part of the design process. Am I answering what you wanted to hear?
Yeah, so if you put the utility bridge in, it would be a whole different engineering project if there was the concept of now wanting to put a footbridge either on top of it or vaulting over it. Am I right?
Correct. The requirements for a footbridge would be considerably different and more complex than it would be for a utility span.
But there's nothing preventing the engineering to do a footbridge or something at a later date.
No.
And Richard, that's what we're going to get to during Trails Committee. And again, if we could really focus on the project at hand, we definitely want to make time for people's ideas and possibilities of spanning that bridge or that gap for pedestrians. But if we could stick with the other elements that are being presented in the connectivity project tonight, and we're trying to get a sense, are we in the right direction for the connectivity project? And use another time to really get into the details of the span, the slumping span. So I really want to ask folks to do their best to separate those two because they really end up being different. And so we want to focus on the rest of the connectivity project.
So just to add to that, Steve, I think to answer Richard's question that I was trying to get at is this does not preclude any further options. By putting in a utility span like we're talking about, for like that Steve just mentioned for this section, doesn't preclude other efforts at a different time.
And we are facing a major concern with the stormwater aspect of this span. And correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but you're right now not able to determine whether or not that stormwater pipe is intact. And if we end up with a heavy rain, is the water going to move where it's supposed to, or is it going to move into the slope?
Yeah, if there's a rupture in that storm drain pipe, it will lubricate that area.
Yeah.
You currently also have an issue with the water line. So yeah. This is a 6-inch water line that feeds that lower section of the city. And right now it's being fed by a 4-inch water line, which has issues with water pressure and meeting your fire demand. So the need to repair or deal with the utilities water as well as stormwater is high.
Thank you for that. Other questions or comments for Patrick?
I'd like to ask one, Steve.
Go ahead.
Just curious how long what is the timeline on this? If we put that in, how long would maybe a 50-foot section last, and how often would there have to be replacements down the line somewhere in the future?
So how long would it last is a function of the stability of the bluff. And how long would it take to install it? It's a pretty fast install. The question would be how long would it take to get our permitting done? And I might ask Trevor to comment on the permitting aspect of it. This above ground with minimal ground disturbance has likely an abbreviated or a shorter permitting process as opposed to other options. Lifespan of this is, on that 20-year span, if there's no more land movement within that spanned area. The larger you make this span, the longer the more outside of the slide area you're going to be. The longer you make the span, the trade-off is it's heavier, which puts more pressure on the slide. And so it's kind of a trade-off. But for the structures themselves, a 20-year lifespan for this is not unexpected.
Thank you.
Other questions for Patrick?
Tom Davies has a question.
Go ahead, Tom.
So Patrick, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong in my assumption, that when the I-beam gets placed, assuming this is what we move ahead with, it's placed, then also the utility lines are done in conjunction at the same time with the project. So the water line would be put in and
the storm drain, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And telecom.
All right.
And just so everybody knows, I can only see 4 or 5 faces and names at a time with the screen share. So feel free to jump in or text me, say you want to speak. I just want to make sure that we're hearing from everybody. And we also have in the packet, we also have an image of the entire connectivity project with the crosswalk up at Edwards, with the observation areas, the overlooks, the vistas. And so please consider that as well.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
This is Gail Kenny. It seems to me that it's premature to be deciding on this solution for the utilities before anything's been really decided on whether there's going to be a trail to continue.
To get it permitted so that we can take action. The decision to take action can happen. This is one of the alternatives, and through the permitting process. And I would invite Trevor to comment on that too. These other options could come up in that permitting process. So this is the least cost and least intrusive option for keeping your utilities intact.
And Trevor, do you have anything you'd like to weigh in right now?
Sure, I think so. I think there does seem to be some confusion about where we are in this process, and I think I see that there's really 3 different issues, 3 different things going on right now. This item is related to this. The city has been asked to do that by its insurance agency. And so when we're talking about the Trails Committee meeting next week and the Planning Commission meeting next week, the item on those agendas is just the temporary
that I have that I'm going to talk to the engineers about when I get the chance. So just to appease everybody's mind at ease a little bit.
All right. Other comments about the current connectivity project that we're talking about?
Steve, this is Dick Bruce again.
Go ahead, Dick.
I have a question for Mr. Sullivan. On the I-beam, what size would the footings be on that I-beam construction, and how deep would they have to be set?
Those are great questions. I think that there's, like I was alluding to before, that the short answer is we don't know yet because the design isn't done yet. We're still in the conceptual phase. So there's factors to trade off, i.e. access. How far are we going to span? The minimum would be that 50 foot. Maximum could be up to that 150 foot. So the farther out you get, the more of the unstable area that you're going to be able to span, but the bigger your input is. So we also need to look at our cultural resources and how we impact cultural resources and how we do our permitting. So there'll be a trade-off on those factors, and that comes out in the more detailed design when we work out some of these other alternatives.
in kind of round figures, say it was 100 feet. Could you give me any kind of an estimate in round figures at a length of 100 feet?
A 3 foot by 4 foot box that could go down as deep as six feet, depending on what the subsurface conditions are.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. And keep in mind too, that's an estimate. I didn't have that on. I didn't pull up my charts and check that. So.
No, that's fine. I was just asking for round numbers. Thank you.
Don't worry, Patrick. We're not going to hold you to those numbers. Other questions or comments?
I have a question and a comment. So I'm a bit confused as to the direction of this conversation. And I think Trevor tried to allude to that earlier. We're talking right now about setting the utilities on something to fix them. That seems like a different agenda item than the Van Wyck connectivity project, since none of them, I'm under the understanding that the money for the Van Wyck connectivity project would not pay for this utility thing. Am I correct in that, or am I incorrect in that assumption? From anyone who might know.
This is Becky, and I could attempt to address that. The project that originally included repairing the trail included addressing the utilities within that solution, which was potentially a retaining wall. And so the thinking of staff right now is that we will still be requesting that the Caltrans grant help us address those utilities by helping to construct this bridge or whatever design is agreed upon. And the option to rebuild the trail in that location, as Trevor said, it's a bigger issue, and we no longer can include that piece in this grant project because of the constraints of time, and just it's been very difficult to get a way forward to juggle all these pieces. So the trail continuing through that area is not part of this project at this time. We're trying to come up with a proposed scope that the community could support, and request a scope change through Caltrans to fund as much as we could of the original project. So that's, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it sort of does. And also, so the next part would, thank you, Becky. And the next part would be, so are we going to ask questions of staff regarding the staff report, council comments on the connectivity project? It seems like we're off in the woods here, not directly with the connectivity project comments.
Okay, this is Eli, and I can weigh in here. We have working on this project from GHD, both Steve Allen and Josh Wolf, and they're working on the connectivity portion. Unfortunately, they're both on vacation this week. So Patrick Sullivan is from the same firm and has some familiarity with the connectivity portion, and plus Trevor and Becky can also weigh in. But generally speaking, matter of fact, if we do have a picture of the map, that would be very helpful. It's that concept map that we presented when we talked to the stakeholders. And that basically shows the fact that the bike lane and the sidewalk would be on the south side of Edwards between Van Wyck and Galindo, and also a new crosswalk on Edwards below Hector Street. And then 3 vista points that are on Van Wyck, 2 of them at either end of the slumped trail, and then one on where Edwards meets Van Wyck, near the crosswalk. So this is the concept map, and it does show the improvements that will be part of this Caltrans project. So yes, rerouting the utilities is a part of it, but the bulk of it is actually the connectivity portion for pedestrians and bicyclists. And that's the main reason why we had invited the property owners along Edwards. So at the stakeholder meeting, we had the property owners on the south side of Edwards because they're directly impacted. The sidewalk and the bike lane will go on the south end of Edwards. For this meeting, we also have specifically invited the Edwards, North Edwards residents, because they're on the other side of the street and also are impacted. And of course, invited the whole overall community. And we wanted to have, both the Churai and the Rancheria and the Yurok all be able to weigh in on this concept. So between Patrick and Trevor and Becky and possibly myself, we can help answer any questions you might have regarding this map.
Okay.
And also right below on the lower right-hand side, it shows the cross-section of the street where there will be the sidewalk and where the bike lane is, and then also where the street is. Okay, so I'll turn it over to whomever.
Okay, so I guess maybe I'll just ask a question right now. So it's referred to a couple times in here, stakeholder comments, review comments, and I did catch some of public comment. And I would like to know what the stakeholder comments were. You just mentioned that the overall community was invited. I thought I heard you say, but I have also heard that that is not exactly the case. So I think
the overall community is invited to this meeting, and we specifically sent letters to the North Edwards property owners about this meeting. But the other meetings that were held regarding the stakeholders, they were the stakeholders on the south end of the Edwards and also the Churai, because that is the area that the south end of Edwards and the Churai were the directly impacted stakeholders. Okay. And then in this meeting, we have all the others invited to weigh in and be aware and ask questions.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. The way I heard you mention it earlier, it sounded like other people were invited that weren't the property stakeholders. So I think everybody in this town is a stakeholder for this project, and I think it would be beneficial for everyone to see what the comments were made at the stakeholder meeting. I think it would be maybe alleviate people's concerns or heighten their concerns that this project is being designed around private property holders' interests that are next to the trail. So if we could be fully transparent and put out the notes for everyone to see of what has occurred at these meetings, I think that would be going in the right direction. My second question is at the bottom of the staff report. It says, based on the feedback, the revised concept addressed many major concerns. And I'm assuming those are major concerns of the stakeholders. I'm not sure. And what are those major concerns? There's nothing that says what major concerns may have been. Like, are major concerns that property owners do not want to see someone walking down the trail at the base of their property? Is that a major concern? Is a major concern that they do not want construction happening on the street side in front of their house? There's a lot of different things that could be major concerns that I think the general public might be interested in as well, besides myself.
Well, let me weigh in and then we can have the others weigh in. But specifically, as was mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the continuation of the existing Van Wyck Trail was not addressed because part of this project, or really the bulk of this project, is the connectivity rerouting along Edwards of both the bicycle and pedestrian. So we were addressing that portion of it and also addressing the vista points, which take people to about the same way where the trail would have before, and we wanted to get buy-in on that. Fortunately, at the meetings that we did have, the input obtained from the various stakeholders that were present at the meetings were very favorable about this whole concept, about the routing of the bike lane and the sidewalk on the south side of Edwards, and also about the 3 vista points that were proposed. So that's the general of it. And then Becky is preparing the notes from that meeting, which will be made public also.
Okay.
So I'll turn it over to whomever else may want to weigh in a little further.
This is Becky, and I just wanted to address a couple of points that have come up. I am sorry that I used the word stakeholder meeting, if that's using too broad of a term. We knew we were having a hearing at this council meeting, but we wanted to give the landowners that would be impacted and the a chance to say, to express their questions and concerns when they looked at this map ahead of this meeting. It is not meant to be making any kind of a deal or agreement in that meeting. We were simply giving them the courtesy, since they would be their property, a chance to have something to say ahead of time. And I'm just going to give one example of a major concern. The right-of-way is, as people know, there's a landslide there, and it wasn't, if a trail was going to be rebuilt, one question was, could we go uphill on, get property from the adjacent landowners? So that was something that we wanted to ask about, and some of them indicated no. So it sort of made sense to look at what our options were by finding out what some of the neighboring people thought. I will get the meeting notes summarized and provide the summary of the input as soon as I can. Last week was very busy, and I just haven't been able to finish everything. So I will do that as quickly as possible. And so again, I want to apologize for using the term stakeholder. I recognize there's a lot of different types of stakeholders, and it was just, as I quickly put this agenda item together, I didn't specify that, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Bryce, it looks like your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I sent you an email about this topic. I hope you had a chance to read it. The problem I see with the way it's presented is it really seems to assume that there is going to be no trail on the Van Wyck where it traditionally has been. You're talking about routing all the foot traffic onto Edward Street. So it really sounds to me like, you've already decided to close the trail, and it's not really a lot of comfort to hear that, well, we're going to talk in the future about possibly some other alternatives down there for a footbridge or something. If there's a time constraint for the grant funding, has anyone formally asked for an extension of time so that the trail part of this can be incorporated in? I can't believe that a simple wooden footbridge, the kind you see in the national parks, for example, or the state parks, if you've got it looks like it's going to be at least a foot, 16-inch wide steel I-beam running along there. The addition of some redwood so people have a place to walk just can't be that complicated. I mean, I'm no engineer, but I've got a sense of common sense of how, things are constructed and so forth. So I think you'd be better off. The idea of the bicycle part of this, I don't see a big pressing need for that. That's a really steep hill. I don't see a lot of people riding up and down that on bicycles, and I don't think the addition of a bike lane would change that. And a sidewalk, here again, if we have the old trail back, I think most people would prefer to walk on the trail than a sidewalk. And the question is, whose property would the sidewalk be on? Would that be on the property owner's land? Is the street going to be wider? Anybody have the answer for that question?
Okay, let me weigh in. It's within existing right-of-way along Edwards where the sidewalk and also the bicycle path will be. And then in addition to that, the Caltrans project has already gotten one extension previously, and we were asking for this extension, and they actually want us to give them everything we can by November, or else the project is dead, which means that the city would lose the over $700,000 of the grant. So therefore, with the concept plan that was shown a little bit ago, the idea is to move forward with the project and then address the existing trail at a later time using other funds, so we don't lose that 700-some thousand, because we need.
The fact that we have an emergency that is pending, and we are not in a position to do anything other than address that emergency. So please, please attend these meetings in the future, and let's use the brain power of the folks in the city to find a way to restore some semblance of a trail on that slope. But now is not the time. Now is not the time to spend on a 50 to 100-foot section when all of these other issues are time sensitive and important.
Can I respond briefly, Mr. Mayor? Well, I appreciate those sentiments, but as this
to assure safe pedestrian traffic on Edwards does not mean that we are abandoning this trail. So I'm going to ask everyone to please stop trying to find solutions tonight for this 50 to 100-foot section. We have to solve this emergency. We have to do it, and we have the money to do so. And we are trying to make sure that the way we are spending that money is acceptable and not as a replacement. I see Mr. Madrone's hand up.
And I need him.
I'd like to be
Forget to
invited
unmute
to the
yourself,
next meeting.
Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, council members and community. Lively discussion. I do appreciate the council's efforts in trying to figure out how to utilize available funding in a productive and supported way in the community. I did take a walk with some of the council members, the engineers and others a couple of months ago to look at the improvements on Edwards, including the sidewalks, curbs, gutters, et cetera. And as it was shown to be within the right of way, and actually does, in a sense, Bryce, widen the road in effect, that right now, a significant portion of right of way is not actually included in the road. It's a bituminous pipe, which has a kind of a oily, or not oily, but it has it's not just metal, it's cased in bituminous material that allows it to prevent rust in that coastal environment. At any rate, it was intact, and right below the garden at the area where the driveway is to the house right there, between the house and the driveway, that piece of pipe that goes underneath what would be a driveway entrance to the garden parcel, that piece of pipe was replaced at that same time. It had been a 9-inch diameter pipe, and it was replaced with a 12-inch diameter pipe. You can make a 90-degree turn and run that pipe with secure anchoring down to the toe of the slope and come in along the beach and develop a dry well, rock-armored infiltration basin for that water to infiltrate in before it goes into the ocean, which is exactly what you're going to be doing down at the bay, at the harbor, with a lot of the stormwater projects in town. You're going to be injecting them into these infiltration basins, basically, to filter before going into the bay. So you could do that with that storm drain right there. Boom, done. Cheap, not that expensive, no big I-beam, no big heavy equipment, et cetera. Now, the 6-inch line, you're going to be tearing up Edwards probably for these sidewalks, curbs, gutters, and everything, exactly where the water line runs. And it'd be a lot cheaper and more longevity to the effort to just simply replace the water line, the 4-inch line, at the intersection of these. It puts nothing in the way of potential trail opportunities to be worked out down the road. And it uses the monies in the grant in a timely fashion. And the other thing about this proposal for the I-beam and the utility crossing is it's also recommended to remove the existing retaining wall, and it calls it a failed structure. And I just want to be really clear, retaining wall has
Engineering brain to some of these comments over the last several minutes. Patrick, can you weigh in?
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate, Steve, your comments. And Mr. Madrone, I appreciate them. I think that the idea of taking this water and bringing it to the toe of the slope from a hydrogeologic perspective is a great idea. We have been working with our regulators since 2006 to deal with the discharge to the bay. And we have put in considerable effort in computer modeling, in water quality sampling. I know that the idea of putting an infiltration basin on the beach is a non-starter with our regulators. It was a very hard uphill battle, and I think many people here who have been part of that process understand that, and I think we need to be really clear that it is not a trivial process to make a new discharge into an ASBS, and they will consider a new infiltration basin on the beach at the foot of that toe of that slope. They will consider that a discharge to the bay. That was my main comment.
Thank you, Patrick. David, looks like you have. I'm going to move back to the council here for just a minute to try to consolidate some of our comments. So at this point, go ahead, David.
I appreciate the dialogue. Yeah, I definitely appreciate the dialogue going on here. I'm not sure what the transit, how it's going to work out. I'm sure what the transit, how it's going to work out height-wise, but the design I was thinking of is a 2-tiered system, and it will actually integrate that I-beam into half the walkway because I'm going to be building up from down below and adding 2 rather than taking out. But that's a different conversation with somebody like Patrick or somebody when we're out here and can actually look at stuff. So I like the exchange of ideas going on here though, because a couple of things I've thought of have been confirmed and a couple have kind of not worked out. So it's I feel like we're progressing for that. But like I say, everybody's welcome. I'm here almost every day to talk about this because it's one of the reasons I got on the council actually when I moved here. So thanks.
At this point, do we have any other councilor comments regarding the connectivity project that is in the agenda?
I have one more comment. It just kind of piggybacks on Steve said it, and I wanted to say it as well. That I know that this isn't it is indirectly about the trail, and I feel like removing a retaining wall that's still holding soil up right there would create tons of problems down the road if we're going to put in steps or anything else that would help alleviate the trail issue. So if we're commenting on this project as I see it on the map, I think that I don't know why that's on there. I would hope we could remove failed retaining wall from a potential part of the project. I think that needs to stay there. I mean, in order to protect what we have of being able to put a trail in, that I believe that should, that needs to stay. That needs the retaining wall. Excuse me, needs to stay. So
I agree, Patrick. Can you? I don't know if that's an older plan that was left in there from an older version of this plan, rather.
I don't think I'm prepared to comment on the geotech analysis. I think that's a Josh or Steve question. I think whether or not the wall has failed would be answered. And I think it has been answered, but I would defer to them.
Fair enough. Any other counselors? I see your hand up, Jim. I'll get to you in a minute here. Any other counselors have questions regarding the agenda item here? Okay, let's move it back to public comment. Mr. Baker?
Yeah, Jim Baker, former council member and interested observer. This is a minor thing, but it's my recollection that the downhill below the Van Wyck Trail, but between that and the beach is also private property. So I'm wondering if Supervisor Madrone or Patrick has approached that landowner in the event of that particular option.
I have not. I don't know the status of the property ownership. I know about permitting our infiltration galleries throughout the city and in the parking lot down at the bottom of the hill. And I know the efforts that we went through to that. And because of those efforts and the feedback we got from the Coastal Commission, from the State Water Board and the Water Quality Control Board, that I didn't consider any infiltration on the beach as an option.
Okay, I just, Mark, the only reason that comes to mind is...
I'd also like to request when that option was developed, like a date on that. And then, again, I would request that we get all the information about the possible options and ideas that are being presented to engineers and staff that the city is considering. Because I think that, we've gotten some information, but this project just on a whole over the past, 5 years or so, it's been really difficult to try to suss out what the council is actually considering, what engineers are considering, and then stay consistent with that. I know that, projects evolve, but it seems like, when we have a meeting, we're presented specific information, and then when it goes to council like this week, there's a whole other presentation being presented that that we didn't know anything about. And it's really difficult to be able to give a thoughtful comment or to be able to support a project when we don't really know what the project is. And I understand that holistically this project has a lot of problems, but I would also just like to bring up that since the beginning of this project, that the Cherry Ancestral Society has been participating and has weighed in with a lot of comments and recommendations, and that we are not just affected by the southern portion of this, that the project affects a lot of the study area along Edward Street all the way up. So, we are happy to try to work with the city, but we need to be able to consider everything. And so we want to make sure that we're getting all of the information. And so that's going to make things easier on us in the long run, because we have had a lot of problems with this project over the last few years.
Thank you for your.
I'd like to weigh in for 1 minute, Steve, if it's possible.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted Sarah to know that last week when we had our meeting, Steve Allen from GHD said he wanted to go and take a look at that area where the pipe would be, where this I-bridge would be. And I told him, I says, I'll join him. And then I actually last week held the measure on one side, and then he went in one direction, and then I kept holding, and then he went in the opposite direction. And today, the picture, the image that's being shown by Patrick, today, this is the first time I've seen that image. So it just evolved between last week and today. So I just want you to know, because otherwise we would have showed it to you last week.
Well, there was no mention of an I. Bigger concern.
Okay.
Ms. Provost.
Thank you. Thank you, City Council, for having an open discussion around this. First of all, I just wanted to applaud the council in their January 14th meeting to pass a motion which was to abandon the Van Wyck Trail, direct staff to explore options to protect the stormwater infrastructure and adjacent utilities, and engage in stakeholder meetings to discuss connectivity as it relates to moving people through town and exploring options that the grant will support. So, I know we haven't talked about the trail, but I hear concerns tonight that around the trail, and I think that's another issue that has to be addressed with, because I'm hearing the science and land is moving all the time, and I'd be very concerned if the council is still considering any kind of trail. But being the connectivity of what we're supposed to be working on and focusing on tonight, I do think looking at all the feasible options, and I appreciate Steve Madrone's suggestions, but I'm sure the engineers have thought of all the different options given this very sensitive area that we're addressing. And so, it's something that's going to take a lot of thought. We're all probably not going to agree with the decision that the city has to make. But I do appreciate the staff reports on this and what might be a workable situation. So thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. And really I really appreciate your summary of all the different things. And really, just to remind folks, we're on phase 1 here, which is to deal with the immediate concern, and phase 2 is not going away. So we are absolutely able to look at all the recommendations for the connectivity project tonight, but no decisions. Remember, in the agenda is a recommendation to direct staff to continue this process. So thank you for your comments. Other comments from folks in the community?
Anita Thompson.
Go ahead, Anita.
Yeah, at the July 14th City Council meeting, item water main replacement on Van Wyck, City Council authorized an emergency temporary bypass repair for the water main. Would it be possible, instead of making it temporary, we make it permanent? So that way we wouldn't have to use the Van Wyck area and just make it a permanent fix for the water main. And as you stated, it is an emergency. My concern, as you know, is a fire safety issue. And I'd like to also know the possibility of making it permanent and not using the Van Wyck. And also, have we started working on that project yet? Because there was some talk about trying to get that done within a calendar year. There's definitely an urgency of getting it done, bypassed. We have correct water flow.
Yeah, first of all, regarding the temporary water main fix, that has not commenced yet. And as far as making it more permanent, that was one option, was talking about having the water actually go down, the second pipe go down on Edwards, instead of having it go where the stormwater is currently planned. So that was one option that was discussed, just having the stormwater go along the bluff and then have the two water lines both go along Edwards. Patrick Sullivan actually is more of a water expert than I think anyone at GHD. So maybe Patrick can weigh in as to what may be feasible.
Well, I think you brought up two good points. One was the emergency issue, which it pertains to a 4-inch water line meeting the water supply and fire demand. So the emergency portion that was approved was to approve the design, and the contracting and efforts on that have started. The the idea would be that we would get that emergency need met as soon as possible, which is within the year. The long-term design, the long-term fix that you referred to would be in conjunction with other projects ongoing. So you minimize your disturbance to the road. Gives us a chance to evaluate all the alternatives for meeting the water supply demand. So the emergency portion of that is, as far as what I understand, and has been started at least in the contracting and preliminary design portions. I think, I mean, as far as the feasibility of the different options, I think that the feasibility discussions would come out during that design process.
Thank you.
And I just want to be mindful of time. So we do have other agenda items tonight. So I just want to keep people in mind, aware of that. Do we have any closing comments for, again, our recommendation is to direct staff, engineers, planners, et cetera. Do we have other comments that are relevant to the direction to move with the continued investigation of options? Really is what we're looking at. Mr. Madrone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a quick question for Patrick that might help with this. Patrick, the storm drain runoff that goes through that culvert across the slide, that does not include Edwards Street. Is that correct? I think it only picks up that upper driveway of Van Wyck that comes down to Julie Fulkerson's old house, basically, and the slope of the house right above it, which is heavily vegetated. But can you clarify that for me, Patrick?
So there is a curb on the south side of Edwards as it comes down. So I don't know that I could say that it doesn't pull that water in. The entirety of the flow coming into that pipe comes up from an upper system, and it's not just that south side. Is that answering the question?
Yeah, I'd like to see the drawings at some point because it's my understanding that they're not interconnected, that the main line goes down Edwards.
I'm not looking at the drawings right now either, so.
Okay, no problem.
But,
yeah, sorry to put you on the spot there.
My question, my concern was when, I did all the hydrology and hydraulics for that area, and I remember delineating watersheds in that regions and where they drain to. And so I know that there is water picked up from and brought down that might not be in the pipe, but it might be in that curb in the parking area by the lighthouse that comes down the hill there. So I'd be happy to go through that with, we could pull up the plans that we have and go through that. I'd be happy to go through them with you.
That'd be great. Yeah, I just suggest that we look carefully at that because if my on the ground truthing of this over the years is correct, it's really just the surface runoff from Van Wyck Street or driveway down to Julie's and the slope above it that was Katie Boyle's old house there. And if in fact that's true, what we're talking about is a very small stormwater runoff catchment. And I certainly understand the comment that you made earlier, and I am not suggesting that we take any stormwater runoff down and inject it directly into the beach. That was not what my suggestion was. So I just wanted to clarify that because clearly nobody's going to approve that. That was the way the old system worked. That picked up everything going down Edwards all the way down to the parking lot and then dumped it at Boat Launch Beach there in that open culvert right at the beach, basically. So that is not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying that I think this is a very small catchment and that one could build a dry well injection off the beach, above the beach, 10, 15, 20 feet above the beach in the toe of the slope with armored riprap and other things so that it wouldn't be delivered directly to the beach. It would be injected down below. And so I'm just thinking that if it is a small catchment, that might be a possibility. And if the 6-inch line can be replaced or just added to the 4-inch line, up along Edwards, you're really getting more bang for your buck. So I appreciate the work you have to do to look at all these alternatives and determine their feasibility. Thank you for the chance to clarify, Mr. Mayor.
You bet, Steve. Other closing comments for directing staff on how to proceed with this connectivity project? I don't see any. All right, thank you very much for the discussion this evening. And again, I did not mean to thwart any discussion, but we do have a full agenda, and we will be coming back to this in more detail in the future. So moving on to number 2, the decision regarding closure of the Galindo Trail. And I know that Trevor has investigated quite a bit some of the permitting process and whatnot in the agenda. So we're moving on to, if you're able to follow in the agenda, not sure what page it is, but Trevor, can you please give us an introduction from a permitting perspective?
Sure. So this is something that the CHRI have requested a number of times because the trail is impacting cultural resources. And so this item is for consideration. It's not taking action to close the trail, but it would be directing staff to pursue that. It's not going to be a simple procedure, and it's not going to be anything that we're going to have a hearing on right away. So I have talked briefly with Coastal Commission staff about the process for closing a trail, and we're gonna need to address some things. For example, they want some information showing that the trail is having negative impacts, and I don't know exactly what that means. They want the city to address the possibility of prescriptive rights. Again, I don't know exactly what that's going to entail. Their other comment was that when you close a trail under the Coastal Act, you do have to look at alternatives and provide sort of a equivalent access in time, place, and manner. So, for example, I asked whether the boardwalk that goes from Lower Van Wyck down to the harbor area would provide that alternative access, and their initial comment was no, because it doesn't get pedestrians to the same place, which is Launcher Beach, and to get to Launcher Beach after exiting that boardwalk, you sort of have to cross an area that has pretty heavy traffic at times. So anyway, it's the Galindo Trail is identified in the city's LCP, and trail closure does require a coastal development permit. So the first step in the process would be to actually amend the city's LCP to remove that trail from the description and the maps. That LCP amendment is going to have to go through the Coastal Commission. So, staff's going to have to work pretty closely with them on moving forward with this process. And again, it's going to be something that we're going to also have additional public discussions and hearings about, but staff does have some legwork to do